Gideon Spring, also known as Ein Harod. It's in more than one place in the Bible. It's in a few places. Very, very famous. Again, it's a body of water. It comes right out of there. It's been there forever. I have a vintage picture. If you want to take a look at it later, I can show you on the bus. There's no way to get a big picture of it. This area used to be a lake here, and this is the water source. So the pictures that I have are from over 100 years ago, maybe 150 years ago. They're very old photos, and it's a great big lake in this area. There's nothing more than weeds in this lake, but you can tell that, it's a very important place. This is where Saul, as I mentioned last time, camped with his army right here. It's a very good place to do it. You got plenty of water. You can get you guys well hydrated, ready to go out and fight the battle. Saul, Jonathan, the army, they were all right here, getting ready to fight the Philistines over at Beit Shan. Mount Gilboa is this ridge right here. So when Saul fought with the Philistines, they probably started on the flat ground, but remember, the Philistines have chariots. So their high-tech army, if Israel can get them up in the hills, they stand a better chance of winning. So they're up on the sides of the hills. They're fighting up here in this very, very steep terrain, and it's a wholesale slaughter. I mean, unfortunately, Israel loses. But just as Samuel told Saul in that mysterious event with the witch at Endor, Endor is in that direction. You could see a large hill right there sort of behind the trees. Around that hill and on the other side is where Endor was. So when Saul was here, he took off and went around either the front way or the back way, but either way he ended right on the other side of that hill. That hill is called the Hill of Moreh. On the other side of the hill is Nain, or Nain, where Jesus raised the widow's son. So that's on the actual village that's on the other side of the hill, as well as Elisha had a thing going on this side of the hill too. I mean, this is just rich in biblical history. But it's mostly known for this event that you know so well as the event with Gideon and the Midianites. There in Judges chapter 6 and 7. And actually it goes on through chapter 8 because it doesn't end well for everyone. It takes a generation or two, but it doesn't go well. But at the beginning it was good. The Midianites had come into the land. Midianites are Arabs from the Saudi Arabian Peninsula. That's where they're from. When we go to visit very briefly, just for an afternoon, we'll be visiting a place called Wadi Rum. Wadi Rum is southern Edom, northern Midian. Moses married a Midianite. That was his wife. Jethro, his father-in-law, was a Midianite. So there was friendly relationships here. Even the Midianites worshipped Yahweh. Maybe not exclusively, but they did worship him. So that's kind of the nature of the area. Well, the Midianites came through this area. The children of Israel, the people of Israel, now they're in the land, they've lived in the land, they've conquered it, they've settled it. And they said, we will do everything the Lord says. And they didn't. And God said, if you do everything that I say, you'll be like no other kingdom on the earth. Everybody will know that it's you, that's me, that I'm blessing you. Everybody will know. But if you don't do what I say, the curses that are there in Deuteronomy chapter 28 that God says I will inflict on the land are not that miraculous. All they are is God just withholding the blessing that would be miraculous and let nature take its course with this people who are nothing more than former brickmakers and herdsmen. And they are nobody in the face of the world without God. So that's the curses. And of course, if you know the book of Judges, it's the most tragic book in the Bible. It's a catastrophe because it starts out with them doing well and suddenly they walk away from the Lord. They get back into idolatry. God brings in an oppressing army, an oppressing people, and it's a disaster for the Israelites, and then they repent. God raises up a judge. He delivers them, and then suddenly they're doing really well, and maybe in a year or two, a generation or two, they're back at it again. Everybody did what was right in his own eyes, but certainly not what was right in the eyes of the Lord. Well, here come the Midianites. The people have gone bad again. Once again, they have learned nothing from all of this terrible stuff that God said he would do, or from the blessings that he said he would provide. They've learned nothing from this, and they're back at it again. And so the Midianites come in For 6 or 7 years, they are oppressing the Israelites. They're destroying their crops. The Israelites are now confined to the mountains and the hills. They're living in caves. Every time they grow a crop, if the Midianites find out about it, they either steal the crop or they destroy it. These people are starving. It's really, really bad. And it's so bad that you have this guy, Gideon, who is with his family. He's from the tribe of Manasseh, and he's threshing wheat in a wine press. Now, when you read this, if you were in ancient Hebrew and you read about how God comes to Gideon while he's threshing wheat in a wine press, this is almost comical were it not so tragic. Because if you go to a threshing floor, it's up on a hillside. It's on a crest of a hill on a ridge. It's a big flat spot because you want to throw the wheat up in the air after crushing it with hooves of animals or whatever, so the chaff will blow away and the seed will fall straight to the ground. That's what you want to have happen. Well, a threshing floor on a ridge is a whole lot different than a wine press, usually in a cave, in a sealed area. So, by the way, if you don't know what all the noise is about, this is Shabbat. This is family day. This is really a good thing. I know it's noisy, but hey, it's wonderful to see families out like this. So just a parenthesis there. So here's Gideon. He's in a wine press because you want to protect a wine press from all the debris and dust and things that the wind might carry in. I remember, as maybe you know, a guy named Gail Irwin. And Gail Irwin described Gideon as being in the wine press, you know, throwing the wheat up and going, you know, where are you going to get the air in a wine press? So it's a desperate, desperate situation. And the Lord shows up and he tells Gideon he's going to be a deliverer. Now, this is a really long chapter. It's a very long story. So I'm abbreviating it now, believe it or not. And as the Lord speaks to Gideon, he says, you're going to do it. Gideon is a very insecure man. Of course, under the conditions, anybody probably would be. But he's saying, you want me to do what? And God commissions him, and he says, if you're really from the Lord, let me sacrifice to you. Now remember, in the spiritual realm, there are only two people in this, two beings in the universe that would want worship, Satan and God, and both of them would receive it. But this is God, and he wants to make sure that this is the angel of the Lord. In other words, an Old Testament appearance of God in human form. This is not an advent like Jesus coming and an incarnation is what I really meant. But this is the Lord showing up, a Christophany, a theophany, if you would. Jesus showing up in ancient times in the form of a person. And so Gideon goes away and he sacrifices, comes back with the sacrifice and sacrifices to this individual who receives the sacrifice. That means either he was the devil or he was God. But nothing in between, not just any angel, because you never sacrifice to an angel. They're not divine. This is not just an angel. The angel of the Lord is God. And then he disappears, and Gideon realizes, all right, I've been commissioned. And you remember, he still has doubts. So he decides he's going to ask God to confirm using the whole subject of doubt. Look, God, if it was really you, he already knows it was. But still he's insecure. If it was really you, I'm going to put this fleece out and I'm going to come up in the morning, and if the fleece is wet and the ground is dry, you know, in other words, the dew, it's not universal. It'd be a miracle to an agrarian, you know, like Gideon, then, then I'll know it's you. And he comes out and he wrings out the fleece, and there's all this water in it. The ground is crackly dry. And then you would think that's enough. He says, let's do it one more time. Let's reverse it. The fleece will be dry, the ground will be wet. And he comes sloshing out to the fleece, and the fleece is dry. And now he knows it's got to be God. So he sends out the word to all of Israel. We're going to fight off the Midianites. They've encamped at the base of that hill there, a gigantic army, an army of 135,000 Midianites who are heavily armed, might say battle hardened. They're ready, and they're over here. Gideon calls together all of Israel. It's not that many, but what we do know is when he gets all of these people together, he's far short of what it's going to take on those guys. He's vastly outnumbered, and God speaks to Gideon and he says, Gideon, you have too many. Tell everybody who's afraid to go up against the Midianites, which would probably be most of them, that they can go home. Because frankly, you have enough people where that if you win the battle, you will get the glory. I want to get the glory. They need to know. It's not like God's a glory hog. It would be true that he's the only one worthy of glory, so he's a God of truth. But he wants to make sure, because the people of Israel are crying out to him that as he's going to deliver him, that they know it was purely him. It wasn't Gideon, it wasn't smart generaling, it was only God who got them free. So, hey, anybody's afraid, go home. 22,000 of them leave. Now he's left with a small army. Gideon, I don't know what he's thinking, but he's probably quite concerned. You want us to take on them with this? And God says, you still got too many. Take them down to the spring of Harod. Here we are. And the river that goes out from it. And it goes down into the Jordan River Valley. And there was a lake here. Who knows what it looked like this long ago, but this was over 3,000 years ago, probably more like 3,200 years ago from now. And he says, sort them out like this. Everyone who gets down on their knees and sticks their face in the water, they're not going to fight with you. Everyone who gets down on their faces, so in other words, they're not kneeling, they're on their faces, but they're lapping the water like this. You pick them. Now here's the deal. We tend to say those were the elite. I even read it this morning, a little commentary while I was boning up on this. Those were the elite. God was sorting out the elite, the ones who are alert because they're lapping the water up and they can look around and see if there's an enemy. The guys putting their faces in the water, they're totally unprepared. This is true. But you see, I wonder if the guys who got down and did this were the guys that Gideon would have actually picked. See, God picked them out. And then he assigned them to Gideon. Gideon did not pick his own men. That's a weird thing, by the way, because when you go to serve the Lord, wherever you serve the Lord and whoever you serve him with, a lot of times we just want to pick and choose our favorite people to be with us. And we got to let God assign that. That's an incredible lesson when you really think about it, because sometimes I have worked with people that I'm thinking, why am I working with this person? Why did you bring them along? And then I find out later, because it was perfect. It was exactly what was needed to win the war. It was exactly what was needed. And so, I mean, there was a poem that a fellow gave to me a long time ago that said this. It said, I dreamt of heaven the other night, and pearly gates swung wide. An angel with a halo bright ushered me inside. And there to my astonishment stood folks I judged and labeled as quite unfit, of little worth and spiritually disabled. Indignant words rose to my lips, but never were set free. For every face showed stunned surprise. Not one expected me. So this is kind of Gideon's effect. God leaves him with 300 men. That's it, against 135,000 over there, of these battle-hardened troops. And these guys have just been struggling to survive starvation. It's a terrible situation. And so, how are we going to arm these guys? What are we going to do? And God says, we're going to beat them with jars, torches, and shofars. So make sure you put some torches inside the jars, and I don't understand the chemistry behind this, but there's a way to get a smoldering torch inside of a jar, seal it up, and when you pull it out and the oxygen hits it, it flares. And it flares up into a torch. This is what could happen back then. This is what they had. So they take the 300 guys. They're preparing to attack the Midianites. They have to surround them, especially on the hill above them. Gideon's having doubts again. So he's told with one of his servants, go down there to the camp and just listen, sort of spy out at night. And what he hears one of the Midianites speaking, saying, look, I had a dream. And I dreamed that this barley bun came bouncing down the hill and hit us and just destroyed us. And Gideon said, that's us, we're going to win. All right, everybody back to his places. And they go up on the side of the hill. And then at the right moment, the 300 people that have the jars, the torches, and the shofars. You know, shofars, a ram's horn. Did I say that right? Okay, anyway. And they break the jars, they take the torches and wave them around, they blow the shofars. And the Midianites wake up in the middle of the night and start killing each other off until all but 15,000 are left and they're on the run. Now, what made that so strange? I mean, why would they start doing that? Because of what they're used to. You see, if torches light up in the middle of the night, it's meant to light up the entire area so that an invading army, a large invading army, can come down and destroy. So when they see all the torches, they realize there's an invading army above us. All 300 men blow shofars. How many shofars need to be blown to send an invading army in? One. There's 300 of them going off. Suddenly they realize we are under attack and the army is gigantic. It's dark, they don't have street lights, and they pull out their swords, and the people are running around the camp, and they're probably not all fully armored at this point because they're camping. They're very secure, and they destroy each other. In the end, Gideon has another group of Israelites come to join them, and they chase these guys on down all the way across the Jordan River, up the river Jabbok, past Peniel, and all the way up into Jordan. And that's where the battle ends. And the Midianites left, and they never came back. That's the story. Here's the interesting part. God picked the guys who would defeat the Midianites, and they never had to lift a sword, at least not at that moment. Were they the elite? Probably not. In fact, there is a theory that God picked the guys who were the most unlikely soldiers because only God is going to get the glory. And if there were 300 elite that took on 135,000 Midianites, who's going to get the glory? It's like the guys in the Alamo winning. They would be the heroes for the rest of American civilization. These guys were probably, well, old, past their prime, perhaps lame, arthritic, whatever they were. Maybe they brought the water to their mouths and laying on their stomach because that's all they could do. We don't know. But they weren't required to lift the sword. They were merely required, wave the torches, blow the horns, stand back, and watch God get the glory. And God did exactly what He promised. You turn to me, I'll deliver you. And He raised up Gideon. You keep going the direction you're going, I'll just let you keep going that direction. That's how God works. So here's Gideon Spring. And the lesson was really, well, actually the break point was right here. This spring, it didn't look like this in those days, but it did look like that. So welcome to Gideon Spring. Amen? Amen. All right.